Hello, Athens, and welcome to Kaleidoscope. I'm Jane Penwell, and I'm here with, ta-da! Wait for it, Nan. She's back. I can't even believe it. I feel like it's been so long since I have actually seen her. But here she is, and she looks pretty much the same, I'd say. Well rested, that's for sure. So, welcome back, Nan.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back, Jane.
Hope you had a good holiday.
I appreciate the wishes.
The audience will be glad to know that the holiday special will no longer be playing. Both of us came from kind of southern cultures, and one of the things my grandmother used to say was, well, I guess we beat that horse to death. And I think we did that with the holiday.
And you continue to hide in the back.
Yeah.
Are you shy?
Me?
I wouldn't think so, but do you always hide way back away from the action?
Well, no, I don't. I don't think of myself as having a shy bone in my body, but there are times when I don't like to be bothered with people. It's not shyness. It's not shyness. I could go, yet again, I say my grandmother used to say, Jane Ann, you would go up and talk to the devil if he appeared. And I'm like, yes, of course, who wouldn't? What? See there? But sometimes I just like, I don't want to make the effort. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's for me, if I feel like making the effort, I do. And if I don't, that's when I hang back a little bit. It's not shyness. So anyway.
She doesn't care about you people. That's why she doesn't watch Kaleidoscope.
No. The reason I don't watch Kaleidoscope is because I don't like to see myself. Oprah, by the way, I looked this up. I knew I had heard her say a quote. She, in 25 years or whatever it was of making her show, only watched 2 of them. So I'm not alone in this. There's something about watching myself that inhibits me the next time.
Okay.
I feel like...
We don't want to inhibit motor mouth, that's for sure.
Most people would say that would be impossible, so there you go. But I got to tell you a funny story about my holiday. On Christmas morning, the kids are opening gifts, right? Mm-hmm. My 7-year-old grandson is just at that age where he loves Santa and he really believes in all this stuff, yada, yada, yada. So his other grandmother and I present him with our bags, full of his gifts. He opens them up, and you'll never guess what happened. Both his other grandmother and I got him the same thing. Unbeknownst to us.
The important thing is which grandmother had to return theirs?
Yes. Which grandmother had to promise to take him to Toys R Us to get something else? Moi. So that was what would be the odds that something like that would happen? I think they're pretty high. So we're still laughing about that. But anyhow, enough of the holidays. That's over and done with. We won't have to worry about that again until next fall. So today, I'm going to do an interview. So you say, who could that possibly be that Jane's going to interview? Nan! I'm going to interview Nan. What do you think of that? One of these days she'll interview me, and then that'll really be horrifying. But Nan has a very exciting project that she has completed. And I am in awe because it's something I have tried to do and failed over the last 20 years. So I'm very impressed with the fact that she was able to complete it. And that project is, Nan has written a book. And she didn't just write a book. That sounds like, oh, well, just dash it off. No, it's not just, I'm trying to write fiction. So that, mysteries to be exact, because you know how I love mysteries. We've talked about that a million times. No, Nan has written something that is real from her experience in life. And I think that would be 10 times harder than trying to make up a mystery story. But maybe not. Maybe I'll take a leaf out of your book. And what do you think? Would it be harder for you to write fiction? Easier to write this?
I'm never going to write nonfiction again.
Ah.
I spent, I don't know how much time in the library on my bibliography. I'm telling you, think twice before you do any nonfiction. And certainly school yourself in how to, from the very beginning, take down information on resources, because, well, the librarians at Ohio University could tell you that they got tired of looking at me because just there all the time.
They're like, oh no, not her again.
Well, you were going to ask me how I felt about having published a book, remember?
Yes, I do. I was getting to that.
Okay, how do I feel?
All right, Nan. How do you feel? She wrote me a script, and I guarantee you I'll never remember it all, so forget that. But having now gone through this experience, first of all, how long did it take?
I would say about 10 years.
Overall.
And it's 438 pages. And how I felt, or how I feel about it is, one, I feel great relief that the thing is behind me. It's out. I can do something else now. So a part of me feels embarrassed because I think I showed myself too much in there, too much personal stuff. And so I kind of creep around. But I needn't worry because I sent out 2 press releases, and neither of which were printed, so nobody knows about it, so I don't have to worry about that.
We'll have to go on YouTube and talk about your book and see if we can get it to trend.
Well, they say when you write a book and want to publicize it, you need about a year head start to get established, your platform established on a blog. Well, it just happens that the last year I've been writing.
Right,
and
right.
I don't know.
Can't do everything at once.
But I do think that the audience may be interested in the fact that the book was entirely free, the printing. And it was through Create Space, which Amazon bought, and it's very easy to publish a book free.
Well, that is interesting.
And this is kind of a local, this has a local story, and I'll kind of show you the, there's the picture on it came from Sarah Herman, an artist in Nelsonville. I stumbled across it because Alexa Ross videotapes Final Fridays every month, and I saw that picture, and actually that is from a video slide that I saw and grabbed. So Alexa and Sarah were both involved in that, and
you know what's so interesting about that to me? It looks Greek to me. I told you that earlier. It looks like, if you've ever been to the Athens Museum in Athens, Greece, you know, they have a kind of a montage of Greek culture going from the bottom around up to the top. And a lot of it is masks, and that looks like a Greek mask to me. And your topic has a Greek, you know, kind of Oedipal notion to it, you know. So it's really interesting to me that you picked that picture.
oh, well, it really moved me, and I loved it, and I'm going to meet Sarah on the 21st, and I'm going to purchase it. I only purchased the rights to show it initially, but it's still for sale, and I'm going to get it.
It's very striking. I'm not sure that the TV does it justice Because when I look at it on your book, on the cover of the book, it has a lot more nuances than I think you can see on TV. Well, let's
Okay.
get back to writing this book, Nan.
Okay, let me tell you that part of me is satisfied that it is not getting publicity, because actually it's on an unpleasant topic, and I don't think people would really enjoy it anyway. But in fact, the first assistant that I hired to help me refused to read it.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And actually, the title may mislead people because much of it is educational. For 12 years, I treated sex offenders in a state prison and learned an awful lot. And amongst those were incest offenders. And I was startled to realize that they really don't think that incest is damaging. They really don't. And so when I retired from the prison system, I decided I wanted to write something to give the public a chance to gain some knowledge. For example, one of the wives told me that they lived across the street from a playground, and she said she wasn't letting him go to the playground yet. There's no yet. There's no yet. Sex
Exactly.
offenders should never be alone around children, period. Even if they're successful in abstaining, the attraction lasts, and they shouldn't want to be alone around any children. And what's even worse are the families that may let them go for a walk in the park to prove to themselves that they're not dangerous anymore. People don't want to believe that Uncle Henry or whoever is really a sex fiend or one of those, or a pervert, because he's just Uncle Henry. And the fact is that sex offenders that I have met in the prison system are quite likable and quite believable, and you just have to watch out.
Well, it's just like mass murderers, serial killers. Everybody says, well, he lived next door to me. He was a nice guy. You know, I can't believe he did that. So it's in two different realms of their lives, evidently.
Well, if they're mass murderers or something, they know they're doing damage. But if they are, for example, a member of the family, something else that motivated me to talk to the public, although they're not going to listen probably, is the fact that parents have trouble talking about sex with their young children or with their children, and but they don't have trouble warning them about kidnappers. It's very rare for someone to actually kidnap someone, but it is anything but rare to be molested by a family member. And by the time they say anything to the child, it's usually about the child is about 9. And by that time, about half of the children have already been, that are victimized, have already been molested. It's too late. So, so I will give you an idea about the content of my book, although you may not want to hear it. You can flip channels if you like. I do want to say that the assistant that stuck with me really saved my life. It was Shannon Stewart, and she did a whole lot, because I'm quite poor at performing with computers, and she helped me. And a cousin who lives in another state copy edited it for me. And one of the questions that I have been asked is what kept me on the job going. And I can recommend this method, which is to have a copy editor that is editing as you go, and to use Dropbox on the computer because you both can respond to the same material. So when I write something and she corrects it or comments or asks a question, I have to tend to that, and then I have to give her something back to continue working. I did not want to do Dropbox. It is, you know, it was very the gutters and the all that stuff. It was, but I was encouraged to stay on it, so I stayed on it. And it's very easy to publish something on Create Space. It gets listed with their books when it finally comes out, and a couple of favorite bookstores in town do know about it and are willing to order it for you. But I'll warn you, I know that it won't be a pleasant experience. But I do want to give you an idea of the table of contents because...
Well, let me say something here. I have read not the whole book, but I'm going to say a good third I have read. And it's not that unpleasant. The topic itself, yes, you have to decide, and you will know, this is the topic of the book, and I'm going to be reading about this particular topic, which isn't always the most pleasant thing to read about. But Nan talks about it in such a, I don't know, down-to-earth, person-to-person way. I think I would be more put off if it were really academic, let us just say, or more involved with the actual activities. That you never hear about. It's the person, what they did, how it made them and their family feel, how they reacted to therapy. It isn't really about what specific action they took. And so to me, it wasn't that unpleasant, but then, you know, I've worked in prisons too. So.
Okay. I have...
Oh, be ready. This is a long table of contents.
26 chapters here. And several sections. And the first section is men who commit incest. This was written initially for men who have never been caught. Only about 5% of incest offenders have been reported. And because of the reporting laws, mandatory reporting laws for professionals, an incest offender cannot go to a therapist and say, I want to work on this problem, because the therapist has to report him then. And so there's this vast number of incest offenders out there that have never had any treatment and can never have treatment unless their victim reports them. And that's the topic of another section. So, who am I? One of the chapters, why did I do it? It's hard to believe, but many men come into prison asking, why did I do it? How could I do it? You know, that's hard for many people to fathom, how someone could molest someone that they care about, because actually most incest cases are motivated by affection, believe it or not. And so if the offender can really accept that it's damaging, then they'll be much less likely to molest someone that they care about.
Well, and by definition, it's a family issue. And families are probably quite reluctant to take a family member to court or to the police or whatever. So it is
That's
kind of
right.
the hidden, agenda.
Right, and so another chapter, important chapter, is treatment, so these men can at least get a glimpse of the kind of approach that's useful. Hurdles in treatment, which in prison anyway include motivation. Because in regular therapy, someone comes because they're hurting and they want to help, but usually treatment for sex offenders is in order to impress the parole board or
Right.
whatever. The modus operandi and will I do it again? It's another chapter, and a metaphor for doing it.
And I might say, having worked in prisons myself, that they say when anybody works in a prison will say to you, once a sex offender, always a sex offender. It's not curable. So Nan was working against the odds doing this in a prison where they don't believe at all that these people can be helped or changed or anything. They're very, reluctant, refuse to think that anything the psych does is going to help. So you had to fight that too as well, I'm sure. And
Right.
in a prison, if a man identifies himself as a pedophile of any kind, a baby, bothering babies, so to speak, then he is shunned by every other. If I murdered somebody, I still in prison think I'm better than somebody who did these things. So these guys have so many strikes against them in prison, even. I mean, where you would think, oh, well, who cares? But they do care. So I can imagine that this was really tough, to deal with.
Another section is bonds that bind. And I had no idea what a trauma bond was until I did research in this area. Now, this book is the third draft that I wrote. And the first two were just my story because I was a survivor, or am a survivor. Because of the offender's tendency not to believe, I knew that my story could be easily discounted. That's just stuff. So that's why I went to the literature and waded through the literature. And we had videos come in, we had speakers, and I will say in the prison system, the training in treating sex offenders was excellent. We just had national figures come to Columbus and to train folks working with these people. So I learned about the trauma bond, and you can think of it as something like Patty Hearst, who, if you recall, she was kidnapped, and after being with these people long enough, bonded with them. Although it's a negative bond, it comes off as confused. And the community and the family section is especially pertinent. I mentioned it a little while ago about wanting to trust and prove that you trust this offender that's gotten out of prison and come back by you know, letting him be alone with a child, which is, it's really, families do such strange things. There was one man in the program, and he was in prison for molesting a boy, and his wife sent him a picture of his grandson nude when he was born.
You
I
know,
mean,
that's interesting you say that, because the wives, it seems to me that that's a whole nother book you could write.
I have it here. I have the mothers.
The wives and mothers who you say, how could they not know? How could they not know? How do they
They
blind
don't want
themselves?
to know. It's like women whose husbands run around for a long time, and they just don't want to
Denial.
acknowledge that.
Total denial.
And that was one of the saddest chapters that I wrote. It's the mothers. What's their role? It varies, but usually, almost always, the relationship between the mother and the daughter in cases of parental incest is awful, is really bad. And that, you know, I fell into such a typical pattern that it's, I don't know, it just made me sad. And I look in the book into, I trace the background with my mother and decide whether she knew or not. I won't give away the secret, the answer. So protecting is one chapter in the community. How do you protect what's the difference between an adolescent sex offender and someone just curious, and the danger of telling other adults that a child has already been molested is just unbelievable. It sets many of their fantasies, ignites them, and I have several examples of people who heard about a child being molested and then turned around and also molested the child.
Oh, for Pete's sake. So they say, well, it's already happened, so.
Exactly.
Why not me?
One family had a meeting because it was revealed that the grandfather had molested the child. And after the meeting, the father molested her because she was already broken in.
Oh my God.
It's just
I believe it. I believe it, but it's the kind of thing that makes me think I would take a butcher knife and just whack that thing off, you know? That'd be the end of that.
Now, I do not recommend that.
Neither do I, but that's how it makes me feel. In fact, I now have a fantasy of myself with a cleaver.
They have found out, and you know, you may think, well, why would a survivor read this book? You know, that's doesn't make sense. But they have learned that survivors who have made some sense out of what happened adjust better than those that don't.
Well, yeah.
And survivors, including me, negated the impact. And once I started on the research, click, 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 all these things started falling into place that I never thought of or saw. And incidentally, I will tell you that there's one possible selling point is that on the very last page of the book is a page that I wrote while the book was being proofread, and was a surprise to me as much as to anyone else. It's just a flip. But my process was going on all the time I was writing, and all the time, oh, and P.S., Roughly the second part of the book is, or are, I don't know what to say, a journal that I kept over the years, and just touched upon the journals, but over the years I wrote my feelings, I wrote things that happened, I wrote things that I read about anything, and included drawings. And listed in my book, I have 28 drawings from my journal over the years, including dreams. So, the fallout, the difficulties, that the damage that incest does, and incidentally, the most damaging of all incest is the father-daughter incest. And very common is stepdaughter, stepfather.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, just, so you really have to think twice. There was one report of a grandmother who was widowed, and she had a bunch of grandchildren, and she got married, and every single one of her grandchildren got molested.
And you know, that's the horrible thing about all of this, is that it's so predictable. You could almost think for yourself, you know, oh gosh, if I do this, what's this man going to be like in interacting with my children and so on. You know, that's the horrible thing about it. It's almost so common that you could say, oh my God, you know, this might happen. Therefore, I have to be uber ultra careful about any male figure that I bring into this family. And lots and lots of women are lonely, unhappy, sad. You know, they want male companionship. That's all very understandable. So it's kind of like one of those things. How do you resolve this issue?
And it's a sad thing about human nature. We talked about how could the mother not know. They don't want to see. They don't want to accept. They don't want to. One of the important chapters in here has to do with the powerlessness experienced by the survivor, because how are they stuck? They're stuck. If they know if they tell their mother, many of them are slapped and called a liar because the mother does not want to believe it. She does not want to believe it for many reasons, including that they lose the house.
Right, you lose the man, you lose the...
And the car and the reputation. And children who actually report, there's a phenomenon called the child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome, which has to do with children that report, but then are browbeaten, threatened, etc., by family to recant. So that goes in some records as false accusation, when it's just the child being afraid, family being very angry at them for sending daddy to prison, and the guilt that the survivor experiences with daddy going to prison. They usually don't anticipate that everything that will happen. There was a young man, fairly young man in our program who died in our prison, and he was in our program, and someone had to call his wife and tell her that he had died. And they said in the background they could hear screams of anguish by the victim hearing that he had died. And she has that guilt too. It may be interesting that I do not recommend whether victims report or not. That's too big a decision for me. But I give some clues or suggestions how to get out of that situation. But I don't know how many young people have suicided and not left a note because they were stuck in this bind. The bad outcomes if they tell, the bad outcomes of continuing in that situation.
Well, and especially I would think if you had younger siblings, you know, that would be victims. What do you do?
Yeah, I did know one survivor who stayed at home to protect her younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
But the strange, ironic fact is that many teenagers who successfully run away from an incestuous condition that maybe their father has told them it would drive the mother crazy, she'd be put in a foster home, blah, blah, blah. They managed to run away, and then the police
Take them back.
happily and return them to that situation. It's just powerlessness is one of the damaging effects of incest. And it's just a mind blower for victims. David Finkelhor came up with several of the damaging effects of incest, especially father-daughter incest. And they include powerlessness, damaged goods. The person feels they're different from everyone else in the world. This couldn't happen to anybody else.
Right.
Must be something wrong with me. And the perpetrator may feed into calling them whore or something like that.
Well, any secret like that, any big secret like that, horrible thing that a child knows and can't tell is always going to be damaging.
And it just draws the child and the mother even further away, because the mother is usually thought of as somebody you can go to in trouble, and if you have to keep a big secret from your mother, then that is difficult. One of the most harmful things, effects of the incest, is the sense of betrayal. And part of that opus operandi, how the fathers do that, is with something called grooming, where they tighten the trust and the relationship with the daughter, usually the daughter, and when the daughter is ripe and very trusting and very close, feels very close to the father, then they start. So it's just a...
So I think sometimes people think, oh, it just happened. But it didn't just happen. It's intentional.
Right.
Intentional behavior.
planned.
And that is something you have to think about. I think sexual things that happen between children or young teens, curious exploration, okay, that's probably spur of the moment, whatever. But for an adult to deliberately cultivate a relationship with a child with the long-term goal of molesting that child, that makes it even more horrible to me. I mean, it's like, what? That's just the worst thing, the worst part.
And that the betrayal is something that later in life, obviously it's going to affect relationships.
Well, yeah.
Just
Yeah. I see why people move to California or wherever they go and get as far away from their family as they can and hardly ever see them. You know, how could you bring your children to this house, to this man on a holiday? I mean, come on. No way in hell would I ever do it. So I can see how this is a really horrible position to be put in because, you know, this man is your child's grandfather. And it's like, oh, it's blowing my mind just thinking about it.
it has seemed to me, and it's not a large number, but just what I've observed, is that a child who has been molested by their father often does not report. But when he, in turn, later molests the grandchild, her child, then she's just so ticked off, she's just going to, you know, put him away. And many grandfathers, well, not all grandfathers.
Not mine.
But it's not unusual at all. And one of the most debilitating things, and they find out from adult survivors of child sexual abuse, is the effect on the victim's sexuality and sexual relations in later years.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, they have some places therapy groups for spouses of incest victims, because sexual dysfunction is one of the major fallouts. And
well, especially for women, because, you know, I think for a woman, sex is so related to closeness and intimacy and, you know, that sort of thing. And to feel that you can't be close or intimate to somebody, there's something horrible is going to happen to you, like it did when you were a child, would be a very inhibiting factor.
And they have, the diagnosis of PTSD has been given to a number of survivors, and dissociative disorders, which used to be called multiple personalities, and borderline personalities. They find sexual abuse in the background of many of them. But this additional damaging effect has to do with traumagenic sexualization. The father introducing the child to sex before they are developmentally able to process. There are a number of developmental hang-ups that children can't go through because of what's been done to the normal development. And I added another effect, which is the monkey wrench effect, which has to do with the age of the child where they're first molested. They have found out that Rorschach's, that's the ink blot test, can distinguish between children who were molested before 9 and years old and after 9. Now,
Oh,
if
for
you can
goodness
imagine,
sake.
looking at ink blots, they can predict that. And
That's
that is
amazing.
really,
And that's such an antique, you know, form of diagnosis and treatment. When I was taking counseling classes, you know, we did a little Rorschach thing, and I'm like, looks like a bat. You know, I don't know. It doesn't look like much to me. But I was astounded to see what some people, it's projection, obviously. It's not there. It's an ink blot. But some people projected onto that ink blot. It was fascinating. That's another book. But I can imagine
not
that.
from me, held up.
Me neither. But I can imagine if you're carrying this load, you know, and you get a chance to put some of it off Why not on an ink blot? It's certainly not threatening. It's not kind of a thing that you would imagine what could hurt you. So I could see, how that would happen. So what do you know? What is the difference in their perceptions of the ink blot between child and, let's say, younger child and older child?
Well, one of them is the oral stage, the need, the hunger, and the younger.
Oh, okay.
And in the
Interesting.
older, it's more anger that comes out.
That's what I was thinking. The whole time I was reading this, I was thinking how mad. I would just have been furious. I would have just been, what the heck? Oh, I can't believe this. I would have been so mad. I think I'd have had a heart attack. It just makes me mad to even think about it.
As a mother or a survivor?
Both. If it had been done to me, or if I found it had been done to a child of mine. Anger, fury. No, not anger, fury. I would have become one of the Greeks, speaking back to the Greeks, one of the Furies. I mean, I would have wanted to kill the person.
Well,
just kill him.
That is your projection because...
True, of course.
Survivors, they have been groomed. They're in a very close relationship. Many of them don't even know what sex is or what parts, the body, the reproduction.
Yeah.
They don't know from nothing, and they have prematurely been exposed to sex in many forms before they are ready for it. They don't...
Right, they don't have enough awareness of what's happening to them to be angry about it, I'm sure. I'm angry as an adult, thinking about this. But then I I tend to get angry about stuff, so I don't know. I mean, I have no way of knowing how I would have reacted to this, but I think that it must be rare for a child to go, oh! Get away from me, it must be rare because this seems to be something that these men rely on, that the child will not act like that.
Well, see, the parents haven't warned them almost. They're recommending now not just to say, beware of strangers.
Yeah, stranger danger.
Yeah, and this is what's permissible touching, and watch your friends. Your friends, people that you know. In fact, as far as incest is concerned, they have it divided into blood and non-blood incest.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And non-blood incest, things like Boy Scout leaders, a favorite babysitter.
Uncles.
Yes, people who are in some kind of caretaking role.
Yeah.
Teacher,
Yeah.
whatever. And in those cases, trust has been brought into the picture.
And another thing I can think of, all this stuff is popping in my head as we're thinking about this, but there is a pleasurable aspect to sex, as we know. Sex can be very pleasurable. So that's guilt-producing too, I'm sure.
Right, and although it may be hard to imagine, I saw not long ago, well, it was several years ago, that some women were charged with raping a man.
Oh.
And that, you're laughing, but the fact is that the sexual organs are made to respond with excitement, and that's
regardless.
completely separate from the brain or whatever. One of the things that many offenders, and it applies to many men, is not having patience with sensitive women. And I think that's why the guys really don't see the damage, because they don't recognize that one of the biggest conflicts for mankind is the conscience versus behavior. And
well, I have to tell you on that topic, I saw the movie The Theory of Everything, which is the Stephen Hawking movie. And he has Lou Gehrig's disease, which eats away at the part of your brain that controls your muscles. So your muscles are okay, but your brain stops getting stimulation from them. Except, guess what? From that the one thing that he could do, his wife became pregnant 3 times. And people said, well, look at you, you're all, And he said, it's a different system. It works by itself, completely autonomously from the brain. And there you go. Stephen Hawking, as a victim of Lou Gehrig's disease, he couldn't even talk, but guess what he could do? So it's amazing. The survival of the species evidently depended at some point in time on this, that it wasn't linked to your thinking brain. It's a completely different system. And that's probably, and that may be something that some of these perpetrators find, that they are they have a response, a visceral, physical response, despite, what's the guilt in them, some of them, that they did this despite the fact that they knew better. That has to be some of them, not all by any means, but there has to be some of them.
That's where it comes in that they deny to themselves that she wanted it.
Oh.
She got up and made it.
She made that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, she made that happen. I get it. But that's that, and we tend to poo-poo that because as women that would never happen to us, or very rarely ever. But I think there's some, after seeing that movie, and hearing it from Stephen Hawking, who else? What more? Learned person. There is something to that, evidently.
I would like to read one paragraph to give the audience a feel for my approach. It's in the introduction. It is for men who molest. The introduction is for men who molest and for other survivors and for the community and family. And for men who molest, I wrote, it is probable that you are much more than a man who molests. You may engage in good deeds, be a hard worker and good provider. Like an animal that has developed rabies, however, you become a danger to society and will be or are being treated as such when your behavior is discovered. Your contributions to society become invisible and you are a marked man. The condition may not be terminal, however. In fact, you are far from alone in the population. Most men who molest children have not yet been reported and convicted, nor have they been exposed to some of the information provided in treatment programs. You can learn to understand your urges and explore strategies for controlling them. That is, we don't talk about cure for sex offenders any more than we talk about a cure for alcoholics. Mm-hmm. But they can control their behavior. And one of the treatment strategies is doing a relapse prevention plan for their individual situation. And one of the recommendations for families is to remember that they are not cured, and watch out for thinking errors. Thinking errors are ways that offenders avoid responsibility. She wanted it. Well, she sat in my lap. Whatever. Here's another one. It wasn't really sex, and by that they mean it wasn't really intercourse. But the fact is that intercourse is the least frequent offense with children.
Well, I'm sure.
So,
Well, like alcoholics, or like they teach in AA, you have triggers. And so, very probably, this person needs to recognize his triggers and
Right.
respond to them just as they would if they were alcoholics. Well, I think this has been fascinating, Nan. We could do a whole nother. And you know, here's something that I think is true, and that is the more sunshine shines on something, the less horrifying and the more easily spoken about it is. So I think to shine sunshine on this issue is probably the best thing that can ever happen, because it's been too long the dirty little secret of who knows how many millions of people. Whereas once you shine sunshine on, it's just like anything else, you know, like alcoholism or like many other things that people didn't talk about and it happened in the secrecy of the home. Now it's out in the open. I think that's an excellent thing, and I think we can only get better from learning about these things. So
Very good.
congratulations.
thanks very much.
And I hope, Athens, you have enjoyed and learned from this, because I
They
sure
probably
have.
all quickly changed it. I shouldn't have told
You
them it
stuck
was.
with us. But I feel like I've learned a ton just from, you know, talking about this issue, which I didn't know much about, really, to tell you the truth. Although I did work in a women's prison, and we had several women who were there for this very issue, which is another thing altogether, I think. We don't think of women as being offenders in this area, and I think they are pretty rare.
Okay.
But good for you, Nan. Congratulations. Go out there on Amazon. What's the name of it again? Fallout, by our very own Nan Michael. And get on Amazon. Get your credit card out. You won't be sorry.
Or our local bookstore.
Or yes, our local bookstore. You
You
won't
know,
be
we
sorry.
have run over.
Oh, well. Worse things in the world have happened. So I guess
Goodbye.
it's time
Goodbye.
to say goodbye, Athens. We'll see you next week.